And this session will share insights on deployment challenges, regulatory considerations, and real-world applications with leaders from Cisco, Juniper Networks, and Rakuten Symphony. That for a deeper understanding of how private 5G networks empower edge computing, that to drive automation, IoT, and next-generation business solutions. And speakers, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, Abraham.
Good to have you. SK, nice to meet you, by the way.
Same here.
Neil, as always, we go way back.
Indeed. It's great to see you again, Abe.
Yep. We'll have to play pinball later.
Indeed. Absolutely.
Bob Everson, it's been a few years since we've done this, but we've certainly done it before.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here again.
Good to have you. SK, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. For the audience, can you talk about that collaboration between private 5G and wireless edge computing and how it really enhances enterprise solutions?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much, Abraham, for having me. The wireless edge computing and the private 5G, they complement each other big time. With the wireless edge computing, you have the data being processed out on the edge. That means it's ultra low latency. You really need a very less amount of time to capture the data, to process the data, to have all these AI-driven technologies, algorithms that you can play it on the edge. And with that, what happens is that your network becomes much more productive, much more, the performance increases a lot. With that, we've got the data privacy issues that a lot of enterprises care about. This edge computing helps to keep the data on-prem. It helps to keep the central cloud infrastructure vacant from being utilized or overutilized. So what happens is when you have this edge computing done on-site, you've got this latency issues covered, you got your data privacy issues covered, security is a big bit, that security is being taken care of. So it actually helps a lot to the organizations or enterprises who have these concerns or challenges to deal with. And this private 5G networks is being adopted by a lot of enterprises over the public 5G just to avoid these kind of issues or address these challenges in the market.
Bob, anything to add?
I think SK covered it really well. The applications that we see for private 5G typically are those higher end, sort of more sensitive applications. As we move into AI, I think the addition is, that inference happening as close to the edge as possible. And as we move into agentic AI, then, those agents obviously are going to be out there. So I think it's a natural fit. He mentioned data sovereignty, so I think he covered it really well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what's been said. I think the one other area that I think customers are increasingly concerned about is the resiliency. So being able to continue business by having that data on the edge. If there's any other challenges, they're able to keep working. And that's definitely, when I speak to customers, when they put stuff in the cloud, they're nervous that if they can't get to the cloud, does that mean their business stops? So they're looking for a certainty. If you've got a factory or an airport or a large institution where you've got thousands of employees that can't work, that's one of the other advantages of putting this in the edge as well.
Actually, Neil, I wanted to talk about some of the challenges when deploying private 5G networks. You just touched on one. Can you maybe walk us through like an example or an actual use case of that challenge?
Yeah, we were working with a customer in the UK on building a private 5G network in a port. And just the health and safety, the way that you build it, the way that you have to work with them, you have to effectively learn their business to some extent. And they have to learn your business, and you're kind of trying to understand, okay, what's the objective that you're trying to tackle, and what's the best way of building the network? And this was all around clean air, making sure that the environment in a port had the right regulatory driven, the other regulatory driven, they had a regulatory driven need to have clean air. And we helped them build a network, a private network that had loads of sensors where you could measure the air quality, and they were for the first time actually able to know whether they were meeting that regulation or not. And it's quite a niche use case, but actually for them it was massively important. And what that enabled them to do was have a use case that enabled the building of the private 5G network, and then now that's opened up other use cases that they want to look at, like video and automation.
Interesting. Anybody else? SK, anything to
I
add?
think, look, from regulatory perspective, I actually totally agree with Neil here. Some of the regulatory requirements that are put on these enterprises when they're actually operating the private 5G network, it's important for them to have all these performance measures done right on site. So, for example, I'll give you the example of not so much from the regulatory perspective, but from, let's say, automotive industry.
Yeah.
Now, when we have private 5G networks installed for the automotive industry, you've got these decisions that are to be made right on the edge. And those decisions are based on some telemetry that is received from the cars or any other vehicle that's being monitored. And that actually helps for them to take those decisions to make those private networks much more useful, much more performance oriented, and with a lot of security and safety, I would say, especially when it comes to automotive industry.
Bob?
Stepping back a little bit, we in the industry made private networks way too complicated from the start.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was sort of this move from wireless technologies, licensed wireless technologies, really came from the telco environment, and it was all sort of engineered around that, where it's the telco's business to run a mobile network. Well, it's not the enterprise's business to run a private wireless network. Like they don't want to know about 3GPP. They don't want to know, they don't want to have to deal with that. It's another type of wire. And so we made it really, really difficult from that standpoint. I think it's getting simpler now, but those were some of the deployment challenges that we had really was around that. And then it's the whole integration into the enterprise systems that, when you focus on that and you make it simpler for the enterprise to adopt, then it's a tool that they can use to solve their business problems instead of, okay, now I have to figure out how to build a wireless system.
Well, that's something to what Bob just said. I mean, just recently, we have announced between Cisco and Rakuten Symphony a collaboration of our RAN networks, including cloud services, as part of a private 5G push towards the market. And Bob and I were talking about the other day, it's a big market right now. It's a $3 billion market, Abraham, and it's going to go up to around, in 2030, it's going to go up to around $20 billion. And that's what the energy, the industry speculation is, or industry expectation is. With that kind of revenue generation from this kind of market, we need to understand what verticals we are going to be looking at and what verticals are actually included. Multiple verticals, a lot of use cases in the world. And when we talk about the integration that Bob was talking about, we have been taking a plethora of vendors into the radio side of the business. As part of the private 5G integration, we want to make it as simple and seamless as possible for the industry, for the enterprises, and every industry, every vertical that we deal with has a different flavor.
Yeah.
You go to mining, they've got a different flavor. You go to automotive industry, different flavor. Manufacturing, their needs are different, the requirements are different. So ultimately, this integration needs to be that kind of seamless that whenever you're adding more features on top of what you already have, which could be customized and tailored for that particular enterprise, you are doing it in a much more simpler and a much more seamless way. And that's where I want to compliment what Bob is saying. Totally agree with him.
Yeah, just building on that. So when we started in private 5G, we sort of started from the opposite direction that a lot of people did, where they started from the radio. I found a lot of radio vendors were going into enterprises and saying, "You need private 5G. Do you want to buy a radio?" And the enterprises say, "Well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that radio. Help me out here." And so we flipped it around and we said, "Okay, we're going to start with the enterprise integration side, and make it really easy for the enterprise to adopt, integrate with their IT systems, integrate with common policy, common security, all these things that are natural to the enterprise, but maybe not so natural to the sort of traditional cellular ecosystem." So we started there. We built a really solid base there. We have a number of radios there, but now it's the time to then take this out into the radio infrastructure and bring that simplicity, bring that programmability in, and integrate this all together. And so that's why I'm so excited about what we're doing with Rakuten Symphony, because I think we have an opportunity to sort of move this all the way out now and fully disrupt.
I think the other thing I'd build on is a lot of organizations have invested in Wi-Fi and invested in Wi-Fi 7. And one of our most recent innovations is how do we bring that Wi-Fi that they've already got and all the integration that they've already got and extend it into private wireless, and at the same time keep the experience as to what they need for their use case or whatever workload that they've got. And I think that's an area where we'll see, I think, a lot of development over the next year. We have a wireless cloud controller that allows, if you're on Wi-Fi or if you're on the private network and it detects a gap in experience, that it'll push you to the right infrastructure so that, as Bob rightly says, customers are focused on their business. They're not focused on radios. They're not focused on any of this cable stuff. They're focused on how do I help my customers, and they don't want to know about, well, I was stuck on a Wi-Fi network and we ran out of the cell edge, or I was stuck on a private network and we ran into some interference. They just want it to work. And I think how we integrate Wi-Fi, and particularly Wi-Fi 7, which has got some phenomenal features that the industry's collaborated on to bring to our customers, I think we'll see more and more of those hybrid networks appearing, and able to generate much more value for customers that have big installations, but also have different needs in different locations, the factory, to the office, to the home. We'll see a lot more of the experience coming together to ensure that whatever they're doing, wherever they're doing it, it works well.
Yeah.
That's right. Absolutely right. Every one of these customers have Wi-Fi before they have private 5G. One of the biggest, another disservice that I think the industry did, maybe not so much we in this case, but the industry overall, was try to create this false dichotomy between 5G and Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
The reality is they're
Agreed.
both going to coexist.
Absolutely.
And it's all just got to be seamless. These are just wires to the enterprise, right? It's wireless, but it's just another connection, right? It has different characteristics. Wi-Fi has characteristics. 5G has characteristics, wired, and so they want this to all work in a heterogeneous environment.
And I'd add to what Bob and Neil were talking about, and I actually totally support that. Hybrid networks, not pure private 5G, but hybrid networks, with private 5G being the core of everything, is probably the solution and the future of this problem, I would say, or the solution of this problem. You've got Wi-Fi. A lot of things cannot happen on Wi-Fi. A lot of features cannot be deployed on Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi networks that are being currently operated by the enterprises, their needs are much more than what they are currently working on with regards to Wi-Fi. But if we make private 5G much more complicated than what they have at this point in time, it's not going to fly.
Yeah.
So we need to make it simpler. We need to make it Wi-Fi-like, but with all those additional features and configurations that our customers, our enterprises are actually looking for.
Neil, are enterprises already clear on a use case or two of how they can leverage AI or Gen AI for their 5G private networks? Or are we just too soon on the discussion?
I think with everything, it takes time. Businesses take time to adjust and get the maximum out of it. And when I'm working with a customer, I'm always focused on, what does good look like at the end of this story? And some customers have got that really nailed.
Yeah.
But also we find customers where they're not network experts and they don't know what is the art of the possible. So with customers in this space, they're trying to transform their business. They're trying to go more digital. They're trying to leverage the cloud. They've got security concerns. It's a very much a consultative approach where I'm trying to learn as much about their business and they're trying to learn as much about how the network works. And when you get there's nothing more exciting when a customer comes and says, Neil, I got this really big challenge, and they're open to experiment. One of the things that we find hard in some industries where the approach to change is, they're either in an industry that's mission critical, so they have a different approach to it. Then we kind of go into the lab and we do things in a more kind of offline way, and then see, okay, what works, this worked, this didn't. Okay, how do we monetize that for you? How do we get that out in front of your stakeholders so that you can win and that your business can leverage these new wireless technologies, be it Wi-Fi, be it private 5G, or both. And then also, let's not forget the wider macro network. How do we roam into that when we need to? Because I see private 5G being a piece of the public network where either the coverage that you need or the use case that you've got isn't going to drive the sort of construction that you need. So we have to think about all of those things, and rightly as Bob said, the customers just don't want to think about that. So that's where they look at us in the network industry as a trusted partner to help them get to that use case and get to that solution. I mentioned the one about ports. The other one's manufacturing. We worked with a company where they were using video to do anomaly detection on their production line. Because if the production line stops, it costs them millions of dollars in terms of cost. So what they were trying to understand is, why does the production line stop? And by using video and AI with video, we're able to show them actually the reason this stopped was because this anomaly happened. And it's an insanely simple thing, but the difference it makes for business is huge. But I would say it's a game of inches. You start with something that you feel you build a solid foundation on, and in this case with the ports, it was this pollution, which is the word I was looking for earlier. How you measure the pollution, and then you spin that into, okay, how do you keep building and adding and iterating so that you're continually driving value out of this network? Because these networks are a big effort for the customer to engage with, and they want to make sure of the 50 things they could invest in, that the private network and networking is something that's going to give them a return.
Good.
Yeah, so I'd like to add something to what Neil just said. So Neil mentioned about the manufacturing industry. Got a real life example. I was reading the other day that we've got BMW and Mercedes both deployed the edge computing for their private 5G enterprise to the automated guided vehicles, the AGVs.
Yeah.
And the study actually said there was a reduction of 30% in the production error. So you can imagine companies like BMW and Mercedes, core of their business is production. They stop producing, we don't get cars. So ultimately, if there's a 30% reduction in the production errors, that is a huge value to any enterprise whose core business is being driven by this 5G private network with edge computing.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. You have to anchor on the business value for the customer here, and there's all these different applications. I wanted to go back to one of the questions I think that you asked in there was the impact of AI on private networks as well.
Yeah.
I sort of simplified that down to a couple things. One, AI has a huge impact on just overall network operations, right? Whether you look at anomaly detection, whether you look at autonomous operations, self-healing network capabilities, all of that just needs to encompass private 5G as well as one of the connectivity types. And so that should just blur in, and that shouldn't really be unique for private 5G as much as part of that overall operations. But I also know that AI has a huge potential to make it simpler to deploy and operate these networks, because I mean, as much as I was sort of maybe a little bit dismissive of the radio at first, it's complex physics, right?
Sure.
And and there's a lot involved there. And I think AI has the ability to make it much simpler to automate from the site survey to planning to deployment to operations. That's how we help get more scale in these networks too, because then you don't have to bring in all these specialist players to deploy it and operate it and understand it, and we can deploy them much quicker.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, Bob. And I think we as network vendors, which is what we are, and we work together and we compete together. What our goal is collectively is to make customers more dependent on the network, because that drives value for us. And by making it easy to deploy, by making it operate by themselves, Bob and I have worked together for years, and we've tried to put networks into parts of industry where it's been so difficult because we weren't doing a good enough job. Now with AI, the operations and the maintenance and the running and the planning of the network is so much easier. So we can get to the value way quicker than we're ever done before. And I think now we talk about 5G monetization and network monetization. I don't think there's been a better time for us to work with customers in an industry where we can deliver the value that they want. And I'm super excited about this, because the more customers feel that they can trust and depend on the network, the more interesting new applications suddenly appear. If you think of Netflix, if they couldn't trust the broadband networks, they wouldn't have built what they've built. What are those Netflix type applications in industry that private 5G Wi-Fi and AI enable and edge compute enable for these. And I'm over the next 10 years, every year I think have we reached the peak, and then we do these developments, and I'm super excited about the next 10 years because I think we're going to see some, super cool stuff. And actually at the show here, we're seeing some of that imagination happening.
And when we talk about sort of autonomous operations and automation and everything going on, it's great that we're in the Rakuten booth.
Absolutely.
As, Rakuten's been one of the leaders there. I'm not that I'm taking over your job here, buddy, but SK, you might want to talk about that for a minute.
You may be the tallest,
stuff.
Bob, but
All right, I'll just add to what you just said. Look, from enterprise perspective, I'm sure all the enterprises would be very, very happy to know that Cisco and Juniper has been working along for a lot of years together, Bob and Neil. So I'm sure they're going to get a lot of value out of it. So guys, very, very warm welcome to our booth. The thing that I want to talk about, the partnership that Cisco and Rakuten sign up for, so Rakuten Symphony. We have multiple parts to it. We have our Open RAN built into it. Open RAN, we have been advocating for a lot of years now. We have been the flag bearers of Open RAN. We have our Rakuten Mobile Network in Japan, the world's largest Open RAN network and the first Open RAN network that's being fully virtualized. And we are gathering all those learnings that we have had along, for all these years, deploying this Open RAN network in the commercial space. Now we're going to bring all that knowledge to the private 5G. And that's the core of it. We see the market is ripe now for private 5G.
Yeah.
Organizations are looking for much larger and much bigger impact of a network on their business than it was before. It's not anymore just to make phone calls. You've got a lot of other stuff that goes on the network, and these enterprises thrive on their business today all through the smart ways of doing things. AI is going to drive everything forward as well, and that all is going to be powered by this private 5G networks.
Yeah, I think these new consultative approaches by telcos for their enterprise customers is a challenge, and it's a welcome challenge, but it also really widens the scope as far as the customer base for the telcos. So as Neil mentioned, it's it's kind of that turning point maybe where monetizing the network and gaining more dependence on the network, as Neil mentioned, is kind of ripe, as you guys alluded to. SK, again, it was good meeting you. You came in somewhat at the last minute, but we appreciate your insight, and you're good to get that insight again, maybe this time next year.
Thank you so much, Abraham. Thank you so much for your time and inviting me. Thank you.
Yep. And Neil Mcrae, with Juniper Networks. It's always good to hear what you have to say. Sometimes you have some really interesting insight that maybe others may not want to mention so much publicly, but you're a brave man.
Well, look, we're here to help. I get my kick out of seeing people use the network, and I know Bob feels the same way. When we see a customer making advantage of the network and improving what they do and improving the world at large, I go home with a big smile on my face, and again, we're working with Rakuten with JCNR and virtual routing. It's great to be working with them and trying to change the paradigm as to how do you build networks and how do you operate them, and Rakuten Symphony's full stack is a great way of doing that.
Sounds good. Bob Everson, again, thanks for your time and your insight from Cisco. And next time we're going to put you in SK's chair so we can bookend you on this session. So I am the tallest on this side. Anyway.
I'm glad to swap if you like.
I didn't know that hurt you so much.
Internally, I'm struggling. I'm trying to put on a good face.
No, always a pleasure. I love this format. Really, it's been a great show too. It's just great engaging with customers. A lot of focus this year on use cases. I'm excited about what we're doing here, really simplifying things, and that just speeds things up. And that's what customers are looking for, is for things to be simpler and faster, and really
point.
getting to their business goals. And that's absolutely where we are.
Simplification for the enterprise is probably a word that we should use more often in our
100%.
Session titles, because that's what they're looking for.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
It's good to talk to you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.